He found something his company didn't want anyone to find, and they came after him for it. Stick around, this one doesn't let go. Subscribe if you're new, you'll want to be here. My name's Merrick Hale, and I was 57 when I learned you can do everything right and still get turned into the office problem overnight. It happened on a Wednesday, September 25th, during our weekly department meeting. About 30 of us were packed into a glass conference room like it was a courtroom. You could hear people breathing, tapping their pens, clicking laptop keys. That's when Brenna Voss leaned back in her chair and said, real calm, some people just aren't built for this pace. Then she slid a formal warning across the table, aimed straight at me. Quick note. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from, and let's continue. She didn't raise her voice. That's what made it worse. She talked like she was reading the weather, while everyone else suddenly got real interested in their screens. The paper sat right in front of me, a printed write-up with my name on it, claiming I was slowing down projects, failing to adapt, and not meeting basic expectations. It read like someone had assigned a C- to a stranger I didn't recognize. I'd been at Lumenwell Products for 6 years. Solid reviews. People used to call me Tape Measure Merrick because I double-checked everything. I didn't move fast, but I didn't screw up either. Brenna didn't care. She looked around the room like she owned every inch of it and said, "This goes in your file today," like she was mailing a birthday card. I glanced up and saw 3 people I'd trained personally. None of them looked back at me. I grew up in a small town outside Cedar Ridge, Missouri. My dad fixed farm equipment behind our house, and he always said, "Shortcuts hurt people." He wasn't poetic, but his hands looked like he'd fought machines and lost. So when I flagged an issue with Pyrosil, our big new patch product, I didn't do it to be difficult. I did it because cutting corners gets someone burned, literally, in this case. Brenna didn't like that. She wanted it out the door by November, clean or not. I didn't play along, and this meeting, this was the consequence. I could feel my throat tighten, my ears burned, but I didn't reach for the warning slip. I just sat there and looked at her, head tilted, cold smile, like she was daring me to push back. Nobody else said a word, not even Devin, my closest friend in the building. That silence, that was the point. I stood up, folded the paper once, and walked out without asking if we were done. I sat down at my desk and unfolded the warning slip. Top corner had the date typed neat, September 18th, a week before the meeting. 2 months earlier, Simeon Quill had retired for good, 63 years old and dead tired. He'd built half of us into the people we were. Not flashy, but solid. The kind of boss who shook your hand and asked how your daughter's college hunt was going. Lumenwell's main campus sat outside St. Louis, a stretch of glass and steel with just enough landscaping to feel corporate proud. Most of us had been there long enough to think the company still cared about doing things right, until Brenna Voss showed up. She came from another division like she was sent to take the place apart, walked in with her tablet and her bright lipstick, looked around like we were dust she meant to sweep out. First meeting, she stood at the front and said, "We're not in the business of perfect, we're in the business of on time." That wasn't just a motto, that was the new rule. The launch everybody was watching was Pyrosil, a night-use self-warming patch you stick straight on your skin. Sleep with it, wake up, reset. That's what the marketing team kept saying, like it was magic. They had billboards ready, contracts with health chains, big push before cold season, and under Simeon, we'd planned it tight. 3 full weeks of final checks, stability validation, retests with real-world handling. Brenna sliced that down to 8 days flat. She said the board wanted it done by early November and dropped the CEO's name, Corbin Say, like a threat. I kept my mouth shut. I figured she was hard-nosed, not reckless. I thought if I met her halfway, she'd return the favor, so I stayed late. I simplified my checklists, I stopped chasing nice-to-haves and started trimming my own margins. I thought, okay, maybe she just wants results. Then I got the final pre-production Pyrosil batch on a Monday morning, and the calendar changed twice before noon. First it said Wednesday delivery, then it changed to Tuesday. When I asked about it, Brenna just said, "We're streamlining." Like shaving a day off the clock was a gift. The patch itself worked by chemical heat reaction. A few layers inside activated when exposed to air and skin. It wasn't complex, but it had teeth. Too much heat, too much pressure, and you had a problem. What bugged me most was our own ads. They showed a person sleeping sideways, patch tucked under a blanket. That wasn't just creative fluff. That was a use case. And pressure plus insulation changes how heat builds up. I flagged it. I said, "We need overnight simulation. Real wear time, body heat, natural pressure from lying down. Nothing exotic, just close to how people actually use it." Brenna tilted her head and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Standard checks," she said. "Don't create problems we don't have time to solve." I nodded, turned around, and opened a new test plan anyway. Then I got to work like nothing had been said. By the 3rd day, the numbers started drifting into a range I didn't like. Not wildly off, not something that stood out and screamed failure. That would have been easier. This was quieter. Under certain conditions, pressure, longer wear, a layer of fabric over the patch, the surface temperature crept higher than our own comfort limits. I didn't go running to Brenna with one result. I reran everything. Different batch samples, different placements on the test surface, slight variations in pressure. I set up a basic sleep simulation, nothing fancy, just enough to mimic a body lying still with a blanket over it. Same pattern every time. Most patches stayed fine. That's what made it dangerous. It wasn't consistent. It was the kind of issue that waits until the wrong person, the wrong night, the wrong position. Then it spikes. I'd seen enough equipment failures growing up to recognize that pattern. The ones that don't fail every time are the ones that hurt people. I put together a clean report. No drama, no loaded language, just conditions, measurements, time-stamped photos, and a straight explanation of what could happen if someone didn't notice the heat while asleep. Skin irritation at best, a low-grade burn if it went long enough. I walked into Brenna's office mid-afternoon and set the report in front of her. She didn't even adjust her posture, just glanced down like I'd handed her a menu she already knew she wasn't ordering from. "That's within acceptable range," she said, sliding it back toward me. I didn't touch it. I pointed to the line that mattered, kept my voice level. "This crosses our internal threshold by enough that prolonged contact could cause a burn." She leaned back a little, eyes narrowing just enough to show she heard me, but didn't like it. "Your setup is extreme," she said. "You're stacking conditions that don't reflect typical use." I shook my head once. "Our ads show people sleeping in it, under blankets, with pressure on the patch. That's exactly what I tested." She let out a short breath through her nose, like I was missing something obvious. "Do you understand what a delay does to my commitments?" There it was. Not denial, not even disagreement, just pressure. "I understand what a burn does to a customer," I said. Her expression shifted then. Not loud, not angry. Just a flat kind of irritation, like I'd stepped out of line and refused to step back. She didn't respond. Just tapped the edge of the report once and looked past me, already done with the conversation. I picked up the papers and walked out. That night, I stayed late organizing my files, tightening everything so it could stand on its own if it had to. Around 10, I pulled up the current spec sheet to double-check the wording on acceptable warmth. That's when I saw the revision date, 2 weeks earlier. I froze for a second, then opened the change log and scrolled. There it was, small adjustment, barely noticeable unless you knew what the old numbers were. The allowable temperature window had been raised just enough to cover what I was seeing. Clean, quiet, convenient. I leaned closer to the screen, read it again, then saved a copy to my personal folder and took a screenshot of the changelog. I saved the spec revision and stared at the screen like it might change back. It didn't. That number had been raised for a reason, and I already knew what the reason was. I barely slept that week. I started carrying the policy manual around like a field guide. Late at night, while Kendra slept, I sat at our kitchen table, flipping through pages and highlighting sections. My hands smelled like coffee and highlighter ink, right there on page 78. If a manager dismisses a substantiated safety concern, the employee may escalate directly to compliance without supervisory approval. Page 82, retaliation against good faith safety escalation is strictly prohibited. That was all I needed. On October 4th, I pulled everything together, data sheets, test logs, side-by-side comparisons, photos, and the spec change history. I sent it to Leona Ortiz, the company's compliance director, with a short note, requesting formal review per safety escalation protocol. I copied Brenna on the email. That was the rule, so I followed it. I figured honesty and process were my cover. I got the read receipt at 9:34. At 9:53, Brenna was at my desk. "My office," she said. No smile, no greeting. She didn't even wait for me to stand before she turned and walked off. I followed her in, shut the door, and sat across from her. She didn't waste time. "You went over my head," I said. "I followed procedure." My voice came out steadier than I felt. My fingers were twitching under the table. She didn't argue the risk. She didn't question the numbers. She locked in on something else entirely. "You created documentation that damages confidence. Intent doesn't matter. Outcomes do." I said, "If someone gets burned, that's the outcome I care about." She looked at me like I was being naive on purpose. "You don't understand how things work at this level." Before I could answer, she opened her laptop and started typing. Conversation over. Compliance didn't waste time. By the following Monday, the PyroCell release was frozen pending investigation. Engineering duplicated my tests and confirmed the same heat issue in 2 out of 5 samples under common pressure conditions. They recommended a small material change and stronger use case labeling. Brenna's schedule blew up on the spot. The release window was gone, and with it went whatever promises she'd made to higher-ups. I couldn't see the fire, but I could feel the heat. The mood around me shifted fast. People still said, "Good morning," but their eyes didn't linger. Nobody stood near me in the break room. It was like I'd set something off, and everyone was trying not to be standing next to me when it went. A week later, I got dropped from 2 weekly meetings I'd attended for years. When I asked why, Brenna didn't blink. "Strategy discussions don't require your level of detail," she said. I almost laughed. "You mean safety detail?" She didn't answer, just pulled her tablet closer and started swiping through charts like I was already gone. I walked out, stopped by my desk, and opened a new entry in the log I'd started keeping. Date, time, meeting removal. Direct quote. If she wanted to play this game, I wasn't coming in blind. I logged the meeting removal and kept going. What followed wasn't a hammer, it was a scalpel. Retaliation didn't come in one big hit. It came in slow, sharp jabs meant to bleed me without leaving a mark. Calendar invites started disappearing. I'd find out about decisions after they'd already happened, then get pulled aside and asked why I hadn't weighed in. When I asked why I wasn't included, I got a blank look like maybe I'd forgotten to check. Deadlines started shifting without notice. I got an email at 9:10 saying something was due at 9, and Brenna copied 3 managers on the thread, like she was documenting my failure in real time. Reports I'd written the same way for years suddenly came back flagged. Too formal. Needs a sharper tone. Could be more efficient. No concrete edits, just comments like she was grading my attitude. In meetings, Brenna started targeting me directly. She'd wait until the room was full, ask something loaded like, "Can you explain why that deliverables still pending?" Then cut me off halfway through the first sentence and move on without letting me finish. It made me look slow, defensive, like I didn't have my grip on things. Tate Rourke, a guy I'd coached back when he was fresh out of college, stopped making eye contact. Then HR told me there was a complaint filed that I was difficult to collaborate with and not aligned with team direction. I knew Tate. He didn't come up with that on his own. He was scared. Brenna had taken fear and turned it into a wrench. She was tightening bolts until people cracked. Devin Reed, my age, solid guy. We'd played varsity ball together in high school, pulled me aside one afternoon. "You need to write everything down," he said. "Dates, times, screenshots. Don't rely on memory. They're building something." I'd already started, but after that, I doubled down. I bought a plain black notebook and kept it in my desk drawer. Every time something shifted, I logged it. Who was there? What was said? Whether it was in writing. Every page had a date in the top right corner and a short title, just like my dad used to do when he logged repair orders back in Cedar Ridge. At home, I was unraveling. I'd shoot awake around 2:40 in the morning, heart pounding, soaked in sweat. I'd stare at the ceiling and play out the next day's landmines in my head, like a movie I couldn't shut off. Kendra noticed. She didn't say much at first, just brought me tea or rubbed my shoulders, but I saw the way she started watching me, like she didn't recognize the version of me coming home every night. One night, while I was pacing the kitchen barefoot, she finally said it out loud. "You look 10 years older than you did a month ago." I leaned on the counter, rubbing my eyes, and said, "I don't think I can outwork this." She didn't argue, just asked, "What happens if you try?" That hit me harder than anything Brenna said. The next morning, I got another deadline change with the time-stamped email proving I hadn't been told. I printed it, stapled it to a fresh page in the notebook, and wrote the new title. Set up to fail, round 3. I slid it into the folder, closed my drawer, and sat back down at my desk like I wasn't dying inside. If they wanted to paint me as the problem, I was going to hand them their brush and keep every record. I slid the notebook back in the drawer and opened a browser tab, searched Missouri one-party consent, read every word twice to be sure. The law said if you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it without telling the other person. I didn't like it, felt sneaky. But getting gutted in silence wasn't noble, it was stupid. So I bought a discreet little voice recorder, and I started carrying it in my coat pocket. Every private conversation, every closed-door meeting, it was on. Brenna loved closed doors. She called them quick syncs. No agenda, no invite. Just a tap on your desk and a quiet, "Let's talk." She saved her real voice for those rooms. Cutting, cold, controlled. In front of the team, she acted like she was coaching me. Behind closed doors, she was cornering me. Early December, a Tuesday, she pulled me into her office again. I already had the recorder running. She folded her hands on the desk and said, "You're not connecting with the team. That's becoming a problem." I stayed calm. I need consistent timelines and access to the same information as everyone else. The gaps are creating. She cut me off with a little smirk. "Sounds like excuses." Then came the part she couldn't take back. She leaned forward slightly, lowered her voice just a notch, and said, "Your future here is over. The only question is whether you leave politely or we make it formal." I blinked once. Steady. "Is that a threat?" She smiled. "It's guidance." Her voice didn't shake. Mine didn't either. I kept my hands still and nodded like I was absorbing feedback. Meanwhile, the recorder in my pocket caught every word, clean and clear. That same week, I got an email from Wynn Marlowe, corporate legal. Wanted to talk about a performance improvement path. Said it was standard, helpful, meant to give me clarity and support. Wynn was smooth, low tone, friendly cadence, like a customer service rep reading from a warning label. but every sentence carried weight. He said, "This is your chance to engage proactively and realign." I said, "I haven't missed a delivery in over 6 years." He replied, "The metrics are evolving." Then came the documents. Pages asking me to acknowledge performance gaps, behavior concerns, alignment issues. Signing would have put my name under language I didn't believe for a second. While that was going on, I started feeling worse. Not just mentally. My stomach burned nonstop, I had hives climbing up the sides of my neck, and my belt was down 2 notches without me trying. I went to see Dr. Elowen Park, a practical, no-nonsense woman I'd known for years. She looked me over, asked a few questions, then said, "Your body is yelling at you. You need leave now." I walked out with a medical note and a timeline, 2 weeks max before she'd pull me herself. Back home, I started organizing everything. Emails, log entries, voice clips. Kendra cleared space in the den, and we turned it into a sorting room. Then I got a message from Sarah Klein, former colleague, now in another department, still one of the few I trusted. She sent me a screenshot, an internal message chain. At the top was Brenna's name, her exact words, "Make him choose resignation. No settlement talk until he's off site." That line snapped everything into focus. It wasn't personal bias. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was a strategy. I didn't reply to Sarah. I just saved the screenshot, named it, and dropped it in the retaliation folder. Then I opened my drawer, grabbed the recorder, and checked the battery. It was full. I slid it back into my coat, zipped the pocket, and waited. I took medical leave in mid-December, and the relief hit like cold air after smoke. Sudden, sharp, quiet. It was the first time in months I could breathe without feeling like someone was pushing on my chest. Devin came over the weekend after, arms full of manila folders and labels. We spread everything across the dining table. Recordings, emails, performance docs, HR threads, calendar changes, even my notebook pages. He was faster on a computer than I was, so he helped me sort it all by event and topic. I never called it evidence out loud, but that's what it was. I also hired an attorney, Hadley Cross, St. Louis-based. Blunt in a way that left no room for doubt. She had the kind of voice that didn't ask if you agreed, it just told you how it was. I gave her 2 recordings and a short rundown. She clicked through the first one, hit pause after Brenna said, "Your future here is over," and nodded once. "This is retaliation," she said. "The timing is clear. We're starting formal with corporate legal, and if they try to bury it, we escalate to state labor." Then she looked me dead in the face. "You don't threaten, you document, every time." While she worked the employment angle, I sent a separate file to the Missouri Consumer Protection Regulator. I included everything I had, thermal data, user simulation details, time-stamped screenshots of the spec change. I didn't know if it would trigger anything, but I wasn't letting it die quietly inside Lumenwell's walls. Mid-January, the day my leave ended, I didn't go back. I sent my resignation letter that morning, along with a formal retaliation complaint. Hadley added an appendix with selected audio clips, just enough to make our point. 2 days later, Wynn Marlowe called again, this time with a friendly tone and a shiny offer. 8 weeks of severance, 60 days of benefits, a neutral reference letter, and some paperwork to make everything clean. Hadley read it and flagged the real play. This non-disparagement clause covers everything. Press, blogs, regulators, even LinkedIn. The confidentiality section is so broad you'd be gagged to your own family. I said, "So that's the shut up and go away offer?" "Exactly," she said. "They're offering you silence packaged as a benefit." I passed. After that, job hunting turned into a weird cycle. Strong interest, then silence. I'd have a recruiter show strong interest, then disappear. One guy, someone I knew through a supplier connection, let something slip on the phone. I got a call warning me you're not a team player. I didn't know what to make of it. I knew. By March, I was burned out. Resume out, inbox dead, funds shrinking. Kendra and I sat down at the kitchen table one night and looked at our budget line by line. That's when I said it. I think I need to leave St. Louis, at least for a while. We packed up what we had and moved back to my hometown, just outside Cedar Ridge. Small place, good air, not a lot of judgment. I took a job at a farm and home supply store, stacking seed bags and cutting chain for ranchers. It wasn't glory work, but the pay was steady, and the noise in my head got quieter. Every night, I came home to my own front porch, cracked open a cold one, and waited for a letter, a call, a shift in the wind, and eventually, it came. The farm and home store sat on the edge of town, tucked between a grain co-op and a tractor dealership. I stocked shelves, ran checkout on Saturdays, helped retirees find wire fencing, and teenagers pick out their first toolbox. Working retail after corporate life punches your pride in the ribs. I'd be explaining post anchors to a guy in muddy boots while thinking about the 6 years I spent managing product safety at a national manufacturer. Most customers didn't care who I was before. They just wanted their feed scooped, and their change counted right. Kendra stuck with me, but the cracks showed. The house got quiet in new ways. Tight budget quiet, too many questions quiet. Her family didn't say it to my face, but I could tell what they were thinking. He picked a fight he couldn't win. By late April, I'd started to believe it myself. Then my phone rang during my lunch break. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Merrick Hale?" the voice asked. "This is Nola Reyes with the Missouri Labor Commission. We'd like your statement." Her tone was dry, clipped, no small talk. I said I'd come in. We met the next day in a government office an hour east. Cinder block walls, old carpet, quiet enough to hear the fluorescent lights hum. I brought a thumb drive with files, printed emails in a binder, and a copy of my medical leave paperwork. Nola sat across from me, didn't even blink as she flipped through the binder. Halfway through, she looked up and said, "Most people don't have this kind of proof." She didn't just ask about retaliation, she leaned into the safety issue. "When companies punish safety reporting," she said, "it's rarely the only problem." I walked her through everything. When I ran the test, how I raised the concern, what changed afterward. I didn't add flair, I didn't speculate, just facts. 3 weeks later, I was bagging fertilizer when a different call came through. This one from a federal number. Consumer Safety Division. The woman on the line asked for a full timeline on PyroCell. When I found the heat issue, who I told, what documents I kept. She asked for names, dates, emails, even print ads. I gave her what I had and told her what I didn't. If I didn't witness something, I won't say it happened. There was a pause, and then she said, "That's exactly what we want." By June, I got an official letter in the mail, request for more detail, with reference to an expanding product review. The language was careful, but I could tell from the phrasing this wasn't just about one patch anymore. Sarah texted me a few days later. "They're pulling files on older launches. People look calm, but it's panic behind smiles." She didn't say more than that. Didn't have to. 2 weeks after that, I got a follow-up call from the same federal investigator. This time, she asked about a separate warming patch from the year before. Not PyroCell. I hadn't worked on that one. I told her straight up. She said, "We have consumer complaints marked user error that match the same heat thresholds you flagged." That was when I understood. They'd had warnings already, real ones, and they buried them. I thanked her, hung up, and walked to the back of the store. Then I opened the break room cabinet, pulled out my folder, and started updating the list of products I thought they might try to hide. I was stocking oil filters in aisle 5 when my phone buzzed. Sarah's name. I stepped outside, thumbed it green, and heard her voice drop to a near whisper. "They're here. Federal. Not just laptops. Warrants." My chest tightened. I leaned against the brick wall by the loading dock. "Documents?" I asked. "Printouts," she said. Brenna walked into what she thought was a promotion meeting. Legal was waiting. Government IDs, not rumors. Printouts. I didn't say anything. Just listened to the sound of wind over the line while my hand curled into a fist. I didn't celebrate or call anyone. I finished my shift, clocked out, sat in my truck, and stared at the steering wheel like it owed me an explanation. What I felt wasn't victory. It was just quiet. A week later, I got a call from a number I didn't know. The man introduced himself as Rafik Murdoch, new director of compliance at Lumenwell. "I've reviewed your PyroCell data," he said. "You were right. If it had launched on the original schedule, people would have been hurt." I waited. "We're rebuilding. I'd like to offer you a role outside your previous chain of command, independent oversight, competitive salary." He named the number. It was more than I'd ever made. A few days later, Glenn Mercer, board member, silver hair, business class posture, walked into the store like she'd done it 1,000 times. She waited until I finished helping a customer, then stepped forward and laid a business card on the counter. "We need people with backbone," she said. It sounded like respect. It almost felt like redemption, but I'd been burned enough to know better. Hadley took one look at the offer draft and scowled. "They don't want closure," she said. "They want control." The fine print spelled it out, sweeping confidentiality, a clause that tried to label my past evidence as company property, language that blurred the line between NDA and leash. Even if I kept quiet, they could claim breach if I so much as shared old test data with regulators. "They're trying to bury what you already know," Hadley said. "You go back under those terms, you give them the shovel." Around that same time, Tate Rourke reached out. He asked to meet. No email, no message, just showed up in the parking lot with his ball cap in hand and guilt all over his face. "She made me write it," he said. "The complaint. I didn't want to." I didn't respond. She said if I didn't, I'd be next. I'm sorry, Merrick. I didn't pat him on the back. I didn't let him off the hook. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out my phone, and played him the recording where Brenna said, "Your future here is over." He didn't say anything else. Just walked off like his knees barely held him. By late summer, Nola called again. Her voice had more edge this time. Your retaliation case is being used to examine a broader pattern. They're not just investigating what happened to you anymore. They're looking at how often it's happened to others. I stared at the wall above my kitchen table while she spoke. That was the moment I stopped bargaining with myself. No salary or title could cross it. I picked up the draft offer and tore it clean in half. I didn't tear the offer just for show. I tossed it in the burn barrel out back and lit a match. In October of 2025, I started a job with a regional consumer protection agency. It paid less than the lowest corporate offer I'd turned down, but I took it because I wanted to stop walking uphill alone. I wanted to work in a place where the rules weren't written by the same people gaming them. My first few weeks were orientation, code reviews, dry packets on ethics and jurisdiction. It was the cleanest air I'd breathed in years. No doublespeak, no fake smiles, no strategy syncs that existed just to box somebody out. Nobody watched the door like they expected bad news to walk in. A month in, Nola called to close the loop. The Labor Commission found clear retaliation, she said. The company agreed to penalties, training, and third-party audits for the next several years. They didn't want a public hearing. That didn't shock me. They were bleeding enough already. The federal side didn't move fast, but it moved. I didn't get every detail, just what they could legally pass along. Short calls, official letters, and one public release that named multiple Lumenwell products, not just Pyrocell. Sarah called me later from her new job in Chicago. She said compliance had dug up 2 more internal cases. Warming products that had triggered complaints, then been waved off as misuse. Same pattern, same cover-up tactics. She said, "Turns out you weren't the first, just the first to push it all the way through." Hadley called with a final update. Brenna Voss is facing personal exposure, she said. Not civil, not criminal, but enough that she won't hold another executive role anytime soon. Her name's poison now. I didn't gloat. I didn't post. I didn't feed the headlines. But then I got an email from Leona Ortiz. It was short, honest. She said, "You were right. I hesitated when I should have acted. I let pressure override policy, and I'm sorry. Thank you for not backing down." I printed it and kept it in the folder. Tate sent a message too, said he was sorry for choosing fear, said he hoped someday I'd understand. I didn't write back, but I didn't delete it either. My health didn't bounce back overnight, but I slept through the night more often. My appetite came back. Kendra stopped watching me like she expected bad news with breakfast. We started living again, not bracing. And the revenge? It wasn't walking back into Lumenwell and demanding a crown. It was watching a system force accountability in broad daylight, and then stepping into a job where I could help make sure the next guy didn't get crushed just for telling the truth. Hold up. Can I ask you something real before you go? If you found proof your job was pushing something unsafe and your boss started squeezing you out, would you speak up anyway or protect your paycheck and stay quiet? If you've got the hype feature, tap it to support this video and help it reach more people. Please subscribe and like too. It's one click and it matters a lot. Then drop a comment, even just good story, or tell me what you'd do in my place.